Hi, everybody. Greetings from Clasheen. Apologies if I look a little bit windswept. It's wet and windy outside, but I'm back inside now wearing linen, which I've combined with some eco-printed fabric. So I'd like to introduce Shauna, my friend, and my digital VA. Shauna will be helping me, and she will be highlighting questions that pop up in the chat. Hi, Shauna.
Hello everyone.
So if you have a question for me, Shauna will be engaging in the chat, but it will appear as if it's me. She's using my name. So if you have a question for Shauna, please, or for me, please put 3 question marks in front and 3 question marks behind. So thanks a million, Shauna, and let's get going. So the whole idea for this live stream today is to answer some of your top questions. Now, I hosted a private workshop at the beginning of the week, and there were many new eco-printers or people new to eco-printing without traditional powdered mordants. And I invited questions for people who were watching that training as a replay, but you may also have looked at some of my free boot camps here on YouTube, and the same questions come up time and time again. So what I'm going to do is just answer them now, and we'll get going. So the first thing I'm going to start with, I have some notes here just to remind myself, but it's really all to do with your pot. And I always say that if you are new to eco-printing without powdered mordants, the process can also be called using the pot as mordant. And the absolute best pot to use for this purpose is aluminium. And the reason for that is the aluminium mimics to some degree the powdered chemical called ferrous sulfate. And ferrous sulfate is used traditionally in dyeing. It helps make fabric or make color on fabric more washable and color fast and light fast, and it enhances the color. So using an aluminium pot is the optimum when you start to eco-print. So how do you identify? One person sent me a question and they said they have some pots, but they don't know whether they are aluminium or not. Now, many aluminium pots have a stamp on them, which will actually say that they are. But if they don't, I had to look online myself for this. For me, they look much more of a silvery gray rather than a shiny color like stainless steel. However, when I looked online, there were a couple of tips for identifying aluminium pots. If you put a stainless steel pot in a room temperature, bring it to room temperature. If you have it in a room and you put an aluminium pot beside it and you leave them both for an hour or 2, so they have time to just acclimatize to the room. If you knock on the side of the aluminium pot, it is going to sound different than that of the stainless steel pot. And when you touch the metal, the aluminium pot will feel very, very slightly warmer. They also discolor easily when you use them. So that's why they look more of a silvery gray rather than a really shiny stainless steel. So you can just look online, do a very quick Google search if you want to see all that information for yourself. It might explain it better than that. But basically, the 2 pots sound different when you tap them. So if you know one is stainless steel and the other sounds different, chances are it's aluminium. If it looks more of a gray rather than a shiny silver, it's aluminium. And if it feels slightly warmer to your touch, it's also more likely to be aluminium. And then other questions about pots. Can I use an iron pot, like a rusty metal pot, or a copper pot? The simple answer is yes, you can. As a new eco printer, I would not ever recommend a copper pot, but an aluminium pot is actually my personal favorite. but that's because I love really dark colors. So if I just stand up for a second and I put this near the screen, I'm always looking for darker colors to wear myself. I really like them, and a cast iron pot will help give you darker colors, but it's not to everybody's taste. If you want brighter, lighter colors, aluminium is the way to go. Copper will modify the color again, but the results are very much weaker. Your prints will be very, very much weaker in a copper pot than they will in aluminium or cast iron. So I don't recommend copper to start with. Then people have been asking, if you're working without mordants in the dirty pot, what actually goes into the pot to start it when you're using it for the first time? So I'll share that in a few minutes. I'll go down and answer all the other questions first, and then I will just flick through a few slides. And I just want to say actually as well that I can answer questions online. Obviously, I can't answer every single question under the sun, but I can answer questions online. But actually working with me and doing a course where you can see me rolling my bundles, laying out my vegetation, processing, and you see pieces after they come out of the pot and then when they're washed and finished. That's the sort of thing I share in a course. And I do have a eucalyptus, an eco printing with eucalyptus in the dirty pot online course, which closes for registration tomorrow. I'm not pushing anyone to join, but Shauna, if you wouldn't mind popping that link up in the comments, please. If you would really like to learn with me, that's a great way to learn. Okay, so I will explain what goes in a dirty pot in a minute. Another question I was asked was, do bundles get submerged in the pot liquid, or do they get suspended over the pot liquid and steamed? So 99% of the time, I submerge all my bundles. I want to get the most intense color and prints from my vegetation. And I also like to get a complex background color. If you are working with traditional powdered mordants, or if you know people who do, probably 90% of the time, well, all the time actually, really, with powdered mordants, people tend to steam, and you don't need to process your bundles for as long. But in order to get the best prints from the dirty pot, you need to submerge them in the pot liquid. And then another question, which was a really good question, when you make a dirty pot and you have some vegetation in the pot to enhance the color of the pot liquid, do you leave this vegetation in your pot or take it out when you are actually printing? And the answer to that is really simple. If your pot is large enough, I encourage you to leave the vegetation in. It will enhance the color. But if your pot isn't large enough to fit the bundles comfortably, the vegetation and your pot liquid, just take the vegetation out and process your bundles. But after the bundles come out, pop the vegetation back in until you are ready to use the pot again. I think it's important to say that the pot liquid gets reused and reused. It gets topped up with water and sometimes a little more vinegar and maybe some fresh vegetation. It gets topped up, but you're using the same pot liquid. You are not throwing it out if you want to get the best prints. And then I highly recommend, unless you have thick commercial or very old pots like I have with thick sides, do not leave your pot liquid in your aluminium pot between sessions. Once you have finished eco printing for the day, take the lid off the pot, let the pot liquid cool down, and when it's just barely warm or cool, just put it into a big rubber or plastic container, a trash can or something, a big one, or a garden tub. Because if you leave that pot liquid in your aluminium pot, you may very well get holes in the side and the bottom of your pot. And don't ask me how I know that. Over the years, I have worked with, some domestic pots that didn't have thick sides, and I have put holes in them. So I highly recommend you take your pot liquid out between sessions and just give your pot a quick swill around. So that's pots. The next thing I'm going to chat briefly about to answer the questions is about vegetation. And a question came in about how can you identify good eco-printing leaves in your own locality without actually trying them? And the simple answer is you can't. There is no substitute for actually trying the leaves. However, in my course, I share a list of my favorite eco-printing vegetation from different parts of the world that I have found has given me and any of my students, either face-to-face or online, really good results consistently. So there is some vegetation that always gives good results, but there is other vegetation that you may have growing in your region that will give you very good results, and it won't give me good results here. And a good example of that would be the walnut tree. I have friends in Northern America who get wonderful prints from their walnut leaves, and I deliberately planted a walnut tree here, and I don't get good prints at all from my walnut. So the acidity of the soil, the growing zone that you live in, the climate, and the current weather conditions, and they all affect how leaves print. And it's important to start with the basics and learn how to achieve good prints using something that will give good prints. So obviously, you know, in my eucalyptus course, I share my favorite eucalyptus leaves, but I also share videos, step-by-step videos using onion skins. Onion skins work everywhere. And once you understand how to lay out your vegetation, prepare your pot, get successful eco prints using the like of onion skins or eucalyptus, then you can move on to other vegetation and start experimenting. But when you are experimenting, I urge you, don't vomit the, the vegetation on your pieces. Always I get students who say, I know you told me only to use X, Y, or Z, but I was inspired by all the leaves in my garden and I put them all on my scarf. And I can guarantee you are not going to get great results. You need to understand the basics, do what I recommend, and then you will get good results. Now, heat sources. So a few of you were asking about using an electric hot plate as a heat source. And I know that in other countries, these may be actually more popular to use than they are here in Ireland. So for me, gas, either propane or butane, gas cooker or a wood fire, they are the two best ways of bringing my pots to a boil. Now, many of my pots are old and they don't have totally flat bottoms. So what I would say to you is, if the pot you're going to eco-print in is able to sit on your gas hot plate, or your electric hot plate, and you can bring a full pot to a boil where the water is bubbling, not just steam coming off the water, where the water is bubbling, then you can definitely use that hot plate. But I have to tell you that both in America, when I was teaching in Tucson, and in Australia, when I was teaching 1 year in Geelong, I was provided with hot plates and we could not get them to a boil. In Geelong, in fact, after 6 hours, my pot hadn't come to a boil. So we had to buy some new cookers. In Arizona, we were luckier because we were able to use a fantastic commercial cooker where I was facilitating the workshop. But I cannot stress enough, you need to be able to bring your pot liquid to a boil and you want to be able to maintain that boil. And please do not try and use a glass hob or a ceramic hob or they may crack. Okay, can I eco-print in my kitchen? The answer to that is yes, if you have nowhere else to print, but providing you have very good ventilation, you open a window, and potentially you could wear a mask. If anybody has asthma, it's not a good idea to be having a lot of steam and eco-printing in your kitchen. But that doesn't mean that I don't eco-print in my own kitchen at times, particularly if it's very windy outside. Then pipes. When you're eco-printing, it's really handy to be able to roll your pieces up on something, because you can make better contact between the vegetation and the fabric. And the pipe that you choose, or the core that you choose for the center of your bundle, that has a big influence on the color that you are going to achieve in the pot. And in relation to the diameter of the pipe, if you have a pipe with a wide diameter like that, and you roll your fabric on it, the fabric is going to be in more contact than if the diameter of the pipe is like that. So I have a series of different pipes, and the wider the diameter, the more influence of color. And by that, I mean, if I take a cast iron pipe, I have some large cast iron pipes. They were actually used as what we call a down pipe here in Ireland. It would be on the side of a house, and it comes down, you know, it collects the water from the gutters and it comes down. So their diameter is about that. And I also have a very small pipe that the cast iron rusty metal one like this, and that was the handle of some farm implement. So I get much more modification of color from the wide diameter than the narrow. They both work really well. And the rusty metal or cast iron pipes, they shift the color towards a darker color. But if I use copper, a copper plumbing pipe, that shifts the color towards a more gold. And in some cases with certain leaves, it actually makes the leaves print almost a little bit more green. Fresh rose leaves, for example, can look greener if you're using a copper pipe. It doesn't always happen, but they can sometimes look a bit greener. So copper tends to make your colors a little more golden, and rusty metal makes them darker. You can also use cardboard tube if you don't want to use metal. So something like the inside of a bolt of fabric. If you go to a fabric store like Joann's or anywhere, they possibly would give you a very thick, heavy-duty cardboard tube, and you can just cut that with a saw and you can use the cardboard tube. You usually only get one go because it gets too soft in the pot. But providing you roll and tie tightly, you will definitely get one go with a cardboard tube. So let's go for this next one here, which is vinegar. When you're setting up your dirty pot, and I'll share that step-by-step process in a minute, I like to add vinegar for the best results. Vinegar has a good reaction with the rusty metal that I also put in the pot, and it helps enhance the colors that you can achieve. But I also sprinkle my wool and silk and cashmere, any fabric that comes from an animal, sprinkle it with vinegar, and I get enhanced results. It doesn't have the same effect on cellulose fabric. And then let me just see, fabric. So here are some questions. Very good question. Why does wool not shrink when boiled in the dirty pot? And here's actually a sample of something I did a little while ago. This actually is wool. And while I didn't measure this piece, at the beginning, it didn't shrink in the pot. I know from the finished size, it's identical as it can be. And the reason for that is we are rolling the bundles, or we need to roll the bundles very tightly and tie them tightly when we are submerging them in the pot liquid. If you are working with mordants, or you have experience with mordants and steaming, you need to make good contact with your vegetation, but it does not have to be as tight as when we are working in the dirty pot without them. And working without mordants is my preference. So I tie really, really tightly. And that's how I can get crisp prints. And there was also a question that came in from Karen just when I was about to go live. And Karen is asking, how can your whites stay white in a dirty pot with rust water? And she's asking, what is she missing? So Karen, let me just take that banner down for a second. this piece here, this was in the dirty pot, and the background, it has some complex color, but it's pretty pale. And that's because I rolled this really tightly, and it's to do with what the fabric actually is. And for me, I don't want a totally pure white background. I want to have it nice and sort of complex. It's to do with the fabric that you use and what's in the pot. So for example, if I have a silk scarf and it's a silk satin, and I have a very, very dirty pot liquid, and if I have a raw silk, a silk noil, and I roll both of them up with the same sort of vegetation, the silk noil will have a much paler or white background, and the satin will have a more complex background. And that's to do with how firm the weave is and the reaction with what's in the pot. Now, the longer your bundle, the larger your bundle, the less effect, like the paler it will be at the center of the bundle, if that makes sense. So really, Karen, I suspect you're not necessarily missing anything, but it is all to do with the sort of fabric you're using and what you have in your pot. If you don't have the rusty metal in your pot, when I'm going to share making that pot up, you will not get such good prints. So it's getting that balance. And then when I'm eco printing on felt, because felt is very much more dense, I can achieve really white, crisp backgrounds if I want to. Okay, let me just see. Fabric, I'll go back to this. So the fabric doesn't shrink because it's wrapped very tightly, and then when it goes into the pot, it's not agitated. What really makes wool shrink is when it gets shocked with different temperatures and when it gets agitated or stirred. So in the dirty pot, once it goes in, it's just left for X number of hours. And are eco prints washable? Are they color fast? How do you care for them? How much soap to use? I think it's really, really important to understand that everything that I share, whether I'm sharing it free here in this Q&A session, the questions that I've received recently, or whether I go into it in much more depth in a paid workshop, like the workshop that Sean is going to pin or put in the comments, everything that I share with you and the vegetation and the process, if you follow that, your pieces are going to be washable. They're going to be washable over many, many years, and they are not going to fade so much. I'll actually just share a picture because I have it here. And this here is a picture of me wearing an onion skin printed top. This is on lamb's wool. Now, this top is about 7 years old now. I wash all my eco-printed garments and anything that I've eco-printed. I wash them in my washing machine, even my wool, but I do have a modern machine. It's about 4 years old. So I put them on the wool cycle and I use olive oil soap. So I prepare that soap by just grating a bar of soap, or if you live in America, you can always use Dr. Bonner's. So something gentle without artificial colors and scent. And I just put a bit of that, a couple of, I grate the soap, I put it in a bowl, I add warm water, I make it into a liquid, and I put a couple of spoons into my washing machine. Now in Ireland, we really all have front loading machines. So I put it in the container that you put it in. If you have a top loading machine and you can lift the lid up and down, just make sure you understand that when you are using a gentle soap, like an olive oil soap, it doesn't get loads of suds. It doesn't look very soapy like a traditional washing powder or liquid would. So don't mistake that and think that you make a mistake and think you need to add more soap. You don't. About 2 dessert spoons, what you eat your pudding with, about 2 dessert spoons is plenty in a wash. And I do recommend that if you have a lot of dark eco prints and a lot of light or red eco prints, that it's best practice to wash your pieces separately. But I have to say, with all mine, I just wash all my eco printing together. But if you're selling your work, you can tell your customers wash dark colors together or light colors together. I just wash them all myself, but that's me. Okay, so I'm just going to look here and then I'll check your comments. So if you do have a question that you would like to ask me, I will answer some of your questions. Just drop them as a comment, put 3 question marks in front and 3 behind. I may not answer every question if it's not relevant to the foundations of this eco printing. So, oh yeah, this was a great question that came in. During the private training I did the other day for people who had registered, I was explaining that you can break the eco printing process down into separate stages. And this is really important if you don't have much time. And I know how important that is because I'm helping care for some family members and I can't always do everything on the one day. So something that I am really keen on in the online course is breaking everything down into manageable steps and drip feeding the information, the modules for the first number of days, the first week. So one of the things you can do is, prepare your fabric. One day you can get your pot together, another day you can make your bundles, but you can actually store your bundles overnight in a fridge or a cool place. So you can prepare them one day, but you don't have to go ahead and eco print that day. You can then eco print the following day with those bundles. And I'm thinking that those of you who are watching this live stream, you're interested, like I am, in being environmentally mindful. So it makes sense to have more bundles in the pot rather than fewer bundles because we don't want to waste our energy that we're using to heat the pot. So I would say you can definitely store the bundles for 24 hours, probably 2 days. I personally don't store them for 2 days, but I don't think there'd be a big problem for 2 days. So what I would do is I would prepare the bundles and then I would wrap them up in something like greaseproof paper and put them in the fridge. Or I know I try and avoid plastic, as much as possible in my practice, but sometimes things arrive in the post or for some reason or other, you have a plastic bag. We all have them, even when we're trying not to. So just get a plastic bag that you've got out shopping or something and wrap them in that. And obviously don't have them touching any food in your fridge. If you have a separate studio fridge, even better. And it goes without saying that you should not be using the same pots for eco printing that you are using to cook clothes in. Somebody was asking, do I use alum? So for all my eco printing in the dirty pot and almost all my dyeing, no, I do not use alum. However, there are times when I would, and that would be if I was using some of my homegrown vegetation for natural dyeing. So I have a big bed of comfrey, and if I don't use alum when I am dyeing fabric with comfrey dye, the fabric won't retain the color. So this is very important. This is why I share about limited vegetation in my, free trainings and YouTube lives, because the vegetation I share about will give you results without you using alum, but not every plant will. There was another question about, is a new aluminium pot or an old aluminium pot better? And I would say all aluminium pots are fantastic. The older pots or bigger commercial pots tend to have thicker sides, and that's definitely better. So the thicker the side of your pot, the better, and the least likely it is to develop any holes. And then there was a question about, do madrone leaves or bark work? I haven't personally used madrone, so I'm afraid I can't tell you. I think they probably do, the leaves, without traditional mordants, but I'm not 100% sure. So I can't answer that any better than that. And then there was a question about barriers. That is not what eco-printing in the dirty pot is about. A barrier is when you use something like waxed paper, or many eco-printers do use plastic. I don't recommend it. And you roll your pieces up and you're preventing that migration of color and shadowing of color. And for me, those are some of the beauties of the eco-printing process. It's what makes the pieces so unique for me. And so I don't use the barriers for that. In my eco-print and wet felt club, I do use barriers if we're doing tannin and iron reactions, but we are doing them without powdered mordants. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to just share a few slides about starting a dirty pot for you. I'm going to check the questions that you have been asking, and then we'll wrap things up. So I'm just going to flick through this because I do have other videos on YouTube about, about the eco-printing process. I have different boot camps that are there, and I'm just going to flick through this. So you can get more information about that in other YouTube videos later. Or if you enjoy what I'm saying and you would like to work more closely with me and have access to a private group, etc., consider joining the online course. Okay, so to start a dirty pot for the first time, you obviously need your pot. And this is one of my aluminium pots, and I have rinsed the pot out. The larger your pot, the better. Now, a question came in and Shauna was saying it looks like there's a pot inside a pot here. There isn't. This is just actually water at the bottom of this pot and a reflection, believe it or not. This is just my aluminium pot, and I had washed it and it was very, very shiny. So rinse out the aluminium pot, and it doesn't matter if the sides look dark like that one, because as I said before, aluminium is inclined to discolor, but that staining is not going to have a detrimental effect on your eco-printing. And in fact, the pot liquid is going to look really dirty after you've used it. That's why it's called a dirty pot. So rinse out the pot just to make sure there's no grease from cooking in it. The larger, the better. Add a pint or two of vinegar and half fill it with water. And I can see that Sue here is asking apple cider or white vinegar. Both work perfectly, Sue. You can use any sort of vinegar. Okay. Add a chunk of rusty metal to your pot. And then I see there is a question here about the rusty metal. Can you leave your iron in your dirty pot when it's in the plastic tub waiting for another time? You cannot leave your metal in your aluminium pot. You want to put it into your plastic tub because the metal is going to eat into the aluminium. So you add a chunk of rusty metal, and I like to add string to my chunk of rusty metal because that way I can lift it in and out of the pot as necessary. And by that, I mean, sometimes I might choose to take it out and dilute the pot liquid. I can gauge the color of the prints that I'm getting. And Leslie actually has a question here. She is asking why are her prints coming out very dark. Now, Leslie, I don't know, but it's possible that you need to dilute your water a little bit, and you need to it depends what fabric you're working with as well. That's the other thing. If you're working on cellulose fabric and doing a rust water dip, that could be the reason. So when you're making your dirty pot for the first time, I like to boil it for an hour before I put the bundles in. And I also like to add some onion skins or some eucalyptus vegetation, if at all possible. Boiling for an hour before adding the bundles will help you achieve more intense results, and it isn't necessary for future sessions. But I do think you need to have your water boiling at that big bubble before you add your bundles in. That gives the best results. I've tried putting them in when it's colder, but you just need to trust me on this. if you want to achieve prints like I achieve, you have to do what I recommend. It's as simple as that. And then between eco printing sessions, remove the metal. And once the liquid is totally cold, transfer it to a bucket so your pot doesn't develop holes. Okay, so I'm just going to check your questions. So here, so this is not a session where I answer loads of different questions about vegetation, because that is something that I share in the course or with my club members. For free information, I just, give the foundation. But leaves that will give a nice green for me here in Ireland. The upper surface of the alder tree gives me good prints, and often the upper surface of a rose leaf will give good green. So those would be two things you can try. The underneath of the rose gives a different color, often a more purple color. So you can certainly try the upper portion of, or the upper side of a rose leaf when that's against the fabric, and that should give a green. It may give a green. Here's a great question from Lizzie. Can protein and cellulose bundles be put in at the same time? Absolutely. It doesn't matter what vegetation you have in your bundles or what the bundles are made from. They can all go in the pot at the same time if you're using the dirty pot process. Gerda has a question. How do I prevent my pot liquid from getting moldy? So if you don't use your pot for a long time, and especially if you live in a warmer climate or a damp, moist climate like Ireland, you may get mold on the surface of the pot liquid. You can't actually prevent that, Gerda, but you can put a mask on and very carefully remove that mold from the top surface, bring your pot to a boil again, and you are good to go and use it again. So Lizzie is saying she can only find olive oil bars. That is what I'm using. That's what I use, Lizzie. And I just grate it into little pieces, add warm water and make a liquid. So that's what I do. So bars of soap, no problem. I have a YouTube video. So afterwards, please subscribe to my YouTube channel. Hit like if you're enjoying the video. But afterwards, you can look and do a search on my YouTube channel in the tutorial section, and you will see how I make my olive oil soap. So I think I have answered most of these questions. Here's a good one from Louisa. I'm not sure that I'm pronouncing your name correctly, so I hope I am, Louisa. And by the way, if anybody else has any questions, please just pop them in for Shauna with 3 question marks, and she will pick up on them for me. So Louisa's question is, she makes olive oil soap herself. Can she use that regardless of the pH? Absolutely. I don't check the pH of my pot, Louisa, and I've used homemade olive oil soap in Portugal. I've used commercial olive oil soap. I've used all sorts of other homemade soaps. You can use any of them. Yes. Let's see. So I'm not a soap maker, Louisa, but if you are using olive oil that had previously been used and you are using it to make soap and you are happy that that soap is doing the job of soap, I don't see any reason why you couldn't use it, but you would have to try it. So that's not something I can help you with, but I personally don't see any reason you couldn't use it if you're happy that the soap does what soap does. It cleans things. And so there is one more question here, and I might show you a few pictures of some of my eco printing then, and I will explain a little about the course for anybody who's interested. So I have a dark green linen blend jacket. Will the prints show in it, or should I only use light color fabric? So this is a question I often get asked. First of all, I'm not very keen on printing blends of fabric unless the fabric is, let's say, linen and cotton, which would both be cellulose based, or wool and silk are both protein based. So if you do a protein and a cellulose fabric, so if it's a linen blend or linen and polyester or linen and wool, first off, you won't get anything like as good a result as if it's all linen or all wool. If it's dark green and it's linen, it needs a dip in rust water, and then you can use your leaves and you'll get black or purpley black prints. So you have to decide, do you want those very dark prints on your jacket? But if it's a really dark color, I would say it's a waste of a jacket printing it. If it's a medium color green, no problem. But if it's a very dark color, I would say you would be better not trying it. Okay, so I'm just going back now to see, are there any more questions? Can I roll on an aluminium pipe? Absolutely. Lynette, this is not a workshop all about leaves, but I will say birch has never, ever given me any eco prints, ever. And I don't get eco prints from my maple here in Ireland, although I have a friend in a different part of Ireland and she gets good prints from her Japanese maple. I have tried over 40 different varieties of maple and I have been extremely disappointed here in Ireland. So that's something I would say in different parts of the world, they may work for you, but they don't for me here. And a question, do you recommend storing the liquid in the fridge between dyeing? Not at all. I never put things in my own fridge. I just would put bundles in if they had to be kept overnight. That would be the only thing I would put in the fridge. Or you can store your leaves as well in a fridge to keep them fresh if you want to use some again the next day. But I still think that I would prefer not to keep things in a fridge, a domestic fridge. And in relation to leaves, you can use your leaves. Let me see, I think I had this somewhere, vegetation. Yeah, there was another question about vegetation. Does vegetation need to be fresh or dried for the best results? So both work really well, but not every leaf dries well. So tough leaves, such as any eucalyptus leaf, oak, certain oak leaves, any tough leaves like that, or cherry leaves, they all dry very well. Cherry leaves may not give you good prints though. I use them for tannin and iron reactions. They don't give me good prints in the dirty pot, but they do store well. And all you need to do is soak them in water until they get soft and pliable. And in general, older leaves print better than younger leaves when you're working without mordants. And another question came in about where to find eucalyptus leaves. So when I started eco printing, I had to buy them from a florist. And the last bunch of eucalyptus leaves that I bought cost me 45 euros. That's not dollars, that's euros. So it's more than 45. It's more than $45. But it was worth it for me because I didn't have access to them. And over the years, I've planted more and more eucalyptus trees and other trees on my property. So in fact, I have over 900 eucalyptus trees now, and I have over 12,500 trees in total. And the rest are deciduous and native species here in Ireland. So you can find eucalyptus leaves in bunches of flowers, often from the florist, in the florist, in America in Trader Joe's, and you'll start to notice the trees in places. For example, in Tucson, they're in loads of the different car parks to provide shade. So they are actually growing in many more places than you realize, and you will start to discover them. So can you over process? That should read soft vegetation. I just made a mistake when I was typing that out. So yes, if you're mixing eucalyptus leaves and soft vegetation, a lot of vegetation will start to deteriorate after 2.5 hours. So leaves that might give some nice color between 2 and 2.5 hours, if you mix them with eucalyptus, they start to turn browner and you don't get such a good print. So definitely, I think onion skins give good results with short processing time, and onion skins give good results with a long processing time. They are good to mix with eucalyptus. So here are just a few more images. Then I'm going to wrap up by looking and checking, are there any more questions? Onion skins on satin, that's lovely and reflective. I'm wearing a silk scarf there and a cashmere dress that's printed with mixed eucalyptus leaves. Onion skins on wool. Eucalyptus leaves on handmade felt. Eucalyptus on lamb's wool. And that's lamb's wool again. That's a lamb's wool beret. And that beret was a sort of a pale blue, a very pale blue. So you can see the bit over my eye. In fact, the background color is slightly blue. So pale colors are really beautiful to print on top of. And often pale and medium colors are good. I don't tend to go for very, very, very dark. Marilyn has a question. Can you use frozen leaves directly, or do they need to be defrosted? Marilyn, you would have to defrost them, because otherwise you wouldn't be able to bundle them. They would be stiff, so they need to be soft and supple to bundle. So I would say you need to defrost them if you're storing your leaves, freezing them. And somebody then is saying they have left their iron in the dirty pot for months waiting to use it again. How good or bad is it? I would not have a problem with using that, but your prints may be very dark. I don't have a problem with that. So I would use it, but if you don't want to have very dark prints, you can either start a new dirty pot, or you can take half the pot liquid out and dilute it. So those are all the questions answered. Questions are over now. If any of you are interested, I'll just add this information to the screen. I have a course that closes for registration tomorrow. If you enjoy my style of teaching and you want to have step-by-step videos showing me working, showing every aspect of the eco printing process, I have a course. It's a one-off payment of $149 US, and that course is available to you for life. So that means pretty much as long as I'm living, so long as I am teaching online with this platform that I teach on, you will have access to this course. So I'll just share a few things that are available in the course. So this is just a little bit. If you click the link that Shauna has actually put into the chat, you will be able to get more information. But I share comprehensive step-by-step eco printing in the dirty pot, text and videos, and they're all broken down into bite-sized pieces. So to prevent people getting overwhelmed, I actually release new modules on a daily basis for the first 8 days. And that's because, as I explained before, you may not have a lot of time and there's a lot of information to take on board. I can only share a really small bit here in a short, free question and answer session. I share so much more in a course, and you get to see me in action. So there are step-by-step video tutorials. So even if English isn't your first language, you can follow along and you can see what I'm doing. In the course, there are helpful checklists and resources to download. There's comprehensive information about eucalyptus, about using it, about growing it, about which varieties give red. I also show you how to use eucalyptus as a natural dye rather than an eco-printing vegetation. So you can dye your fabric. You can get beautiful background colors for your fabric. You can then go ahead and print on top of it. I share information about some of my favorite eco-printing vegetation. I give you very helpful instructions about using soy milk as a binder. Now, if you don't want to get dark prints on cellulose fabric and you're used to using rust water with cellulose fabric, using soy milk and eggs, that's something I share in the course so you can get colorful prints without using traditional mordants. There's a private alumni community that I have on Facebook, and that's where you can ask questions, you can get feedback, and you can make friends with like-minded peers. And anybody who joins before midnight tomorrow, Pacific Daylight Time, so 11:59 PDT, that's the West Coast of America. If you join before then, which is the cutoff point, I'll be doing 2 bonus Zoom calls during April, towards the end of April. So you will have the opportunity to work at your own pace through the content in the course, and then you will have access to those group calls. And then if you buy today or tomorrow, you get lifetime access to the course. And I see a lovely message here from Karen. Karen, thank you so much for that. So Karen is saying, thank you, Nicola and Shauna, love you both. And we love you. So if you haven't taken a class with Nicola, please do. You won't be sorry. It is well worth the money. Thank you so much for the endorsement, Karen. That was totally not asked for, but I really appreciate you saying that. Thank you so much. So there are a couple of questions coming in. When do the 8 days start? So Steve, when you register and purchase the course, it's set so that you get access to day 1, or you get information immediately. Then for the next 7 days running, you get new modules. So by day 8, you have all the modules. Honestly, there is just so much information available in the course. So if you click the link that Shauna has put in the chat, that will give you information. You can see more about what the course is about. And so if you joined today, you would have access to the first day's information today. If you joined tomorrow, you would get access to it tomorrow. And then after the first 8 days of access, on day 8, you can request to join my alumni group on Facebook, because you've already read the information, looked at videos. And at that stage, you can ask and you can upload images of your own work. You can ask questions, everything. I'm there, Shauna is there, and there's a really, really big friendly group of people who have studied with me. So you will get feedback, help, and support in that private group. So Mary is asking, will the paid course be offered again? It will be offered again in about 6 months' time, Mary. I think about 6 months' time. But it closes tomorrow night. So if you're interested in it, now is the time to jump on board. If you're not already on my newsletter, on my mailing list, Shauna might drop my newsletter list into the chat, or maybe not, Shauna, because once this video ends, you can watch it as a replay on YouTube, and there's a link to my newsletter in the video description. I announce new courses, etc., in my newsletter. I have a weekly newsletter. So when it will be offered again, that will be available then. And Caroline is saying, yeah, this is part of it. So Caroline is asking, can I buy the course now and watch it in 2 weeks' time? Yes, Caroline. The whole concept about this course is that when you start, the information is drip fed over the first 8 days, but you do not have to, there aren't live streams. The recordings are already done. So you do not need to be online at the same time as me on any day. So you could buy the course now, and then in 2 months' time, you could look at everything. Obviously, you get the most from the course if you go and work through the information from start to finish whenever suits you, and if you interact in the private group, and if you join the Zoom bonus calls as well. And anytime, if you buy the course now, and I choose to add more information to the course in the future, you will also access that new information. So once you buy the course, it's for lifetime access and you don't have to pay again if I add more information in the future. So look, thank you all so much. I really appreciate your attention. I'll just bring Shauna back onto the screen for a second so we can say goodbye. Thank you very, very much, everyone. And Shauna, thank you so much for all your moderation in the background.
No problem at all. Thank you. It was brilliant.
So that is fantastic, everybody. It's been a pleasure. I hope I've answered your questions. So over and out from Ireland and from the Netherlands, where Shauna is tuning in. Oh, no, she's back in Ireland. Apologies. Over and out from Ireland, everybody. Bye.
Bye.